Hello, welcome to Sage X3 quick video tutorials. In today's session, I will be talking about a scenario where whether we can delete an expense generated by error, meaning that user accidentally created an expense and how to remove it. So for that, let's take a look at a user authorization setting, and we will also look at different ways to generate expenses, such as we can create an expense directly in the fixed assets module, and we can generate expenses from other modules such as purchase invoice, supplier BP invoice, general journal entry, miscellaneous issues, and finally imports. So these are the different ways that we can generate an expense, and then once we generate the expense, we can capitalize them and create an asset. So there is a query IM008 which can be used to query non-capitalized expenses. And finally, we will link an expense to an asset and then see what happens regarding deleting the expense. So let's go into X3 and take a look at the settings, user setting. So the user setting is under setup, users, and I have two users. One is FA01, which is a fixed assets user, and the admin user. So for the FA01, I have set up the parameter for the authorization to no, and for the admin, the authorization is set to yes. Alright, so that's the user settings, and then we can generate expenses in different ways. That is, we can go into the fixed assets expenses and create a new expense, or we could go into purchasing invoices, and then we can create an expense via the purchase invoice too. So we will set the source to miscellaneous, and then select the product, and then you need to also set the type here to be fixed assets, along with the account number that manages the fixed assets. So that's via the purchase invoice, and then we could also use the supplier BP invoices to generate an expense. So for that, we need to have the purchase type to be asset, and then the account, GL account, has to be set to track fixed assets and depreciation and expense generation. So the purchase type is fixed asset, and then I'm using the standard account 17100. So if I look at the common data, general accounting tables, general accounts, so the 17100 account is set to track fixed assets, expense creation, and the accounting nature is set to fixed assets and service. And we could also create expenses via originated from another module that we looked at: purchase invoice, supply BP invoice, general and miscellaneous issues. So the general journal, once we finalize the journal entry, the asset expense will get generated. So here the status has to be final. And for miscellaneous issue is that you have to run the stock accounting interface. Okay, so once the expenses are being created, I have just query the table LAYOUTFAS, the expense table for this particular company I'm working on, and just to show you how many expenses I have currently and how they were originated. So one is the default is the invoice, and then 4 is the interface. One is the transactional entry, the direct creation, and 4 is the interface generated by other modules. And for the invoice type, one is standard is set to invoice, and then 7 is for miscellaneous issues. And also you could look at the additional source field. So here 0 is direct creation, and then 1 is purchase invoice. You can see PIN 19. 2 is BP invoice, supplier BP invoice, and then 3 is general journal, and then 5 is imports, and finally 6 is stock issue. Okay, so I have 9 records. Alright, so let's go in and capitalize an expense. So under fixed assets. Okay, and let's create new. Enter the financial site and give a reference, and then click capitalize. So you can see all 9 lines. So let's select one which is generated directly, and then I will also select the pin 20. So pin 20 is the supply BP invoice. Okay, and I will click apply. So that will bring in the asset at 8,300 balance sheet value for straight line method, duration 5 years. So I click create. And once I created the asset, we will take a look at the SQL query. So you can see for this asset and this expense and this one, the asset link is set to 2. What that means is that the expense is associated to an asset. So if I go into fixed assets and expenses, and if I look at the expense number pin 20, so you can see the asset here, asset link is checked, and then the reference of the asset is shown here. So once that is linked to an asset, we cannot delete it, because even if it's an admin user, it cannot delete it. So what we understand here is that once the expense is linked to an asset, that expense cannot be deleted. So if we have to delete it, then the asset, the link between the asset and the expense have to be removed. So it's under fixed assets, and undo. So here you can see we can only undo the one of the lines. But still we cannot undo the other line, because that's the primary expense for that asset. So suppose if you don't have any transaction entries against this asset, meaning that depreciation postings, revaluation postings, or other postings that would prevent an asset to be deleted, we cannot go and delete the expense, right? So what that means is, right now I don't have any transactions against this asset, right? So I can click delete and delete the asset, and then I can remove the expense also. So here, if I query again, you can see the asset link has been removed, and pin 20 can be deleted. Okay, and if I want to see the expenses that have not been capitalized, I can use the query. So it's under reports and view queries, and it is IM8. Sorry, IMM008. Here right now you can see I have these expenses for this company. So 9 expenses, and none of them have been linked to an asset yet by capitalizing an expense. But if I capitalize one of the expenses, then I cannot delete the expense because it's linked to an asset. So that's what we see here in the online help under the expenses function help, under deletion section. So the deletion of an expense is prohibited in the following cases. So it is capitalized, linked to a financial asset. It is taken from another module or an input. So we looked at different expenses from different modules, but we were able to delete the expenses only when we have that general parameters LOF, DE, L, AUT is activated for that user. So if I look at another user, that fixed asset user here, so let me log out of admin user and then log in back as the fixed asset user. Expenses. So you can see for this user the delete button is not enabled, but he can delete the direct expense generated within fixed assets module. So that's all I wanted to explain to you today basically, and then so that you understand what is the use of that parameter and how many different ways that we can generate an expense, and how we can capitalize it, and what happens when it gets capitalized, and then how we can delete those expenses. So that's all I have, and thank you for your time, and have a good day. Thanks, bye.